Google is the latest tech giant to come under fire. The company is facing concerns about antitrust, privacy, and bias. Let's bring in Tony Romm. He is technology policy reporter for The Washington Post. He's written two pieces about Google just this week, one about YouTube's $170 million child privacy settlement with the Federal Trade Commission, and the other about antitrust concerns among over 30 attorneys general with different states. Tony, thanks for being here. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's talk first about the settlement with the FTC. That's a big deal because it went directly at YouTube and the relationship with advertisers. What happened?
Yeah, the Federal Trade Commission finally acted on years of complaints that YouTube was improperly collecting data about children under age 13. Remember, under federal law, kids under age 13 have special protections. You have to get parental permission before you collect their data for the purpose of things like serving them targeted ads. And what the feds contended was that YouTube was fully aware that children were using its platform and used that fact as a way to entice advertisers and entice brands, but didn't check the right boxes with respect to kids' privacy laws. So we saw a $170 million fine and some other penalties there.
Will that change the way they're doing business, the way they're reaching out to kids, the way they are dealing with advertisers at this point? And is that anything that you think would potentially hurt their bottom line down the road? Or is this a one-time deal? You pay the fine and you move on?
Yeah, well, the hope is that it'll change their business because YouTube and Google shouldn't be collecting this information.
I mean, change their business in a way that hurts their bottom line.
Right. I think the fine sort of speaks to that. It's not like Google's stock price suffered from a $170 million hit. That's like, what, 2 days worth of revenue for a company like Google. So the fine alone wasn't a whole lot. But it will be interesting to see what this means for Google, given the fact that so many toy brands and television shows and whatnot use YouTube to reach younger audiences. And targeted ads are much more lucrative than some of the more contextual ads that the feds would like to see Google serve alongside children's content.
The state attorneys general, that's a different situation because these are 30 state attorneys general, bipartisan, both sides of the aisle, who sound like they are coming together to really target not only Google, but many other big technology companies, too. They don't like what they see in terms of a monopoly, and they don't like what they perceive to be as bias. What is this going to mean? What's happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, right. The states are very concerned about competition in the big tech space. And it's not just states, by the way. The feds are doing the same. But we're expecting to see an announcement from more than 30 AGs. And we're talking about Democrats and Republicans alike targeting big tech with antitrust concerns and opening a specific investigation into Google. And so what this means for the company in the long term remains to be seen. But when you have both the states and the feds and bipartisan interest in antitrust and an investigation into a company, it doesn't necessarily mean a good thing. So I think the challenges are just beginning for Google here in this space.
Eric Cantor is our guest host today. He's the former majority leader in the House of Representatives. And Eric, we talk about how nothing seems to ever be able to be gotten done in Washington. Is this a different situation because you have an issue that it seems to me is bipartisan?
Yeah, you know, I think this is an issue that's bipartisan. There are different incentives for either side to sort of go after big tech. You know, on the one hand, it is on the Democratic side. The motivation is they believe that big tech allowed the Russians to come in and mess with the election. And then on my side of the aisle, you know, there is a lot of allegation that there is some type of curating, if you will, or excluding conservative voices. So again,
that's enough of a nuance there that maybe the two sides don't come together. But then you have issues like privacy.
This is my point. Those two issues I think are mismatched. But there are issues of privacy. But I keep coming back to the point on the privacy fact is that most people will go click through the I accept, even if you now are getting the European regulatory face on your apps if you travel abroad. People just click away and said, fine, go take whatever information you've got. They don't quite sort of think that the trade-off is a bad thing for them because people get access to a search engine or an app. And I think we've not...
FOMO, right? It's fear of missing out.
We've not quite gotten to the point where people say, hey, I want to own my data. And I think at the point where you can monetize your data personally is the point at which maybe you can see some balance reintroduced into this equation.
Tony, what should we watch for next week with the state attorneys general? What's the next shoe that you think is waiting to drop?
Right. I think the first thing is going to be to watch exactly what the states point their fire at first. Because as, Eric Cantor and others have pointed out here, there are a lot of issues, whether it's bias, whether it's privacy, and some of them aren't explicitly antitrust, but the states do have a lot of power in areas like consumer protection to go very big on a company like Google. And I think second thing to watch is going to be the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission, which have opened their own broad reviews of big tech. It'll be interesting to see if they partner with the states or if they go at it alone, and how that evolves in the coming months.
Tony, that's what I just wanted to ask you really quickly, because you have AGs, all of whom have different motivations in different states. Some are completely political, in which they just want to be able to say that they're going, for the jugular. There are others that actually want specific things from a Google, meaning they actually want to be able to show that they've, settled for X, either dollars or something else. You have the DOJ and everybody in Washington, and that's almost a different issue. There's a political element to that, of course, but I would like to think that there's actually maybe a more merit-based version of what's going on there. Maybe. How do you think about that whole stew?
Right. I think they're complementary. The states are going to probe potentially a bunch of issues. And by the way, there are some states that have been looking at Google for quite some time now. Missouri is one of them. Before Josh Hawley became a senator, he was leading an antitrust investigation of Google within the state of Missouri. So those pieces are certainly still unfolding. And the feds have taken a much different approach. The Justice Department, for instance, had announced this broad review of big tech that said it was going to look into search, e-commerce, and advertising and social. That pretty much matches up with Facebook, Google, Amazon, and so forth, even though they didn't mention those companies by name. So I think the feds would tell you that they're going to go where the facts lead them, whether it's in the direction of digital advertising or something else. So there's just a lot of activity now. All of this rhetoric is finally leading to something among regulators, state and federal.